Assalamu alaikum. So 2 weeks ago, we started our introduction talk about Quranic and Prophetic Mannerisms and also introducing social Islam. For the rest of our talks, we're going to loosely draw back on social Islam and showing how the points made in Al-Adab al-Mufrad are relevant to social Islam and their effects and the social virtue and the spiritual virtue or fada'il. So the author of Al-Adab al-Mufrad was Imam Bukhari, and that's what our lectures are mainly going to be around today, the life and times of Imam Bukhari. A point that I wanted to just draw on quickly before going into Imam Bukhari is the hadith in Tirmidhi, which is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "A time will come when holding on to your religion is like holding on to hot coal." So a brief explanation summarizing what bin Baz said about the hadith was, what the hadith means is that a time will develop when being Muslim, even like stating that you are Muslim and carrying out your deen, will cause people to prosecute you as a Muslim. So even holding the views of Islam and the beliefs of Islam will lead people to present and discriminate against you, or to literally prosecute you, or to cause troubles for you. And a vast majority of ulama apply this hadith to today's times and say that we live in a time where being Muslim is difficult. Being Muslim places trials upon you, and people look down upon you or judge you for being Muslim. But at the same time, people take this hadith and use it as a baseline evidence for them being apologetic and justifying their failures or shortcomings as a Muslim. So people say that, oh, I don't pray 5 times a day, and times are difficult. It's hard enough being Muslim as it is and believing Allah, because look how it is to be Muslim. And then people try to judge that, or various other sins that I won't really discuss in detail, but people apply those things to this hadith and say, look, in our day and age it's hard enough being Muslim as it is, let alone being a upright Muslim. Now, a lot of people have a bit of a confusion over what it actually means to be practicing, what it actually means to be an upright, morally good Muslim. The general definition here of what it means to be an upright Muslim is someone who does not commit major sins, and in their minor sins, they don't frequently do them. So if they commit a minor sin, it's rare, it's a one-off, they're not aiming to do it again. Many people will look down on their minor sins and say, oh, it's only a minor sin. Did you know some ulama say that if you look down on a minor sin, for you, it becomes a major sin. So an upright Muslim is defined as someone who does not commit major sins and they don't persist or frequently perform minor sins. So like I said, using that hadith, people try to say, look, it's hard to be a Muslim, and they justify this hadith for them being a not so good Muslim. However, would I be right in saying that it's difficult somewhat being a Muslim when the government per se proposes views that are contradictory to Islam? Like, do you agree with that? That if a government proposes views that are contradictory to Islam or directly oppose Islam, that makes you, and you're living in that government, does it make it difficult for you to be a Muslim?
To some degree, yeah.
And would I also be right in saying that it's difficult to be a Muslim when you're living in times when the Muslims themselves don't have much value for Islam? And on top of that, they've taken Western culture such as going out and drinking or going to clubs as being acceptable, an acceptable thing to do. That would also in some ways make it difficult to be a Muslim. And additionally, especially in our times, knowledge is easily accessible. Would you agree that you can go on YouTube and find a lecture on any scholar from any particular view or methodology that you want, and it will be on YouTube. Books from the early generations all the way up to now are printed and easily accessible. So knowledge is widespread. And we have these corruptions. Now the reason why I'm listing them in this way is because what I'm trying to say is that our time and the difficulties that we ascribe to this hadith are exactly the same as Imam Bukhari's. Imam Bukhari was born in the later part of the Abbasid Khilafah. So first we had the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we had the Umayyads, then the Abbasids. Now the government in Islamic history, meaning from the Muslims, already became corrupt in the Umayyads. So who knows like the major catastrophe that occurred in the Umayyad Khilafah? Just a quick guess. It's one of the biggest causes for sectarianism in Islam and groups in Islam. The massacre of Hassan and Hussein. That occurred in the Umayyad Khilafah. So already one dynasty or generation in terms of leadership has come, and something so disastrous such as the killing of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's family has already happened. Now we've got the Abbasids. Now the Abbasids, they proposed and propagated views that directly contradict and they're going against the values of Islam. They're going against the beliefs of Islam. On top of that, where Imam Bukhari was from, Bukhara, which is near Khurasan, which is modern day Uzbekistan, was a newly converted area. So these people, only 4 generations ago did they become Muslim in the time of the Umayyad Khilafah. So in the time of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, that's when these people became Muslim. So from them, they were still new to Islam. Only 4 generations into Islam. They hadn't had the full experience of the other Sahaba of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So their culturing and their nurturing in Islam was very weak. On top of that, they neighbored with the Romans, which means that they had Western influences. The people in Bukhara widely drank, openly drank. It was common for them to drink alcohol. On top of that, they had like what you would consider modern day nightclubs. But on the flip side, the Abbasid Khilafah was the pinnacle of Islamic knowledge. Like all the Islamic sciences were growing and developing. This was the time period where Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal lived, which was one of the turning points in fiqh, which we're not going to discuss. And at the same time, all of the sciences in the Islamic world were growing, including medical. So on one side, you're having all of this corruption, and on the other side, you're having this growth in Islamic development as well in terms of knowledge. So bringing it back to my point, can we really say that the hadith of there will be a time when holding on to your religion is like holding on to hot coals can accurately be used as an excuse for not being a practicing Muslim, when Imam Bukhari had pretty much exactly the same lifestyle conditions that we have, yet he became Imam Bukhari? Now, just a quick show of hands, who knows Imam Bukhari, or has at least heard the name Imam Bukhari? So, like most people know Imam Bukhari, and he's most famous for his book Sahih al-Bukhari, which the majority, if not all of the scholars say that after the Quran, it is the next book of the Muslims, the most authentic book after the Quran. So, just as an introduction to the life of Imam Bukhari, That's just to show you the situation in which he grew up. So Imam Bukhari's name is Muhammad ibn Ismail ibn Ibrahim ibn Mughira ibn Bardizbah al-Bukhari al-Ju'fi. Al-Ju'fi is a tribe, an Arab tribe. Now, Imam Bukhari was not an Arab. What happened was, when his grandfather converted to Islam, it was a practice amongst the people to adopt the name of the person whose hands you became Muslim on. So, if someone became Muslim by my hand, for example, they would adopt my name, my tribal name, if I was an Arab, which I'm not. So, but Imam Bukhari's grandfather adopted Al-Ju'fi, which was the tribe of the Arab man who converted him. So it got added to his name, and that was the tradition of the Arabs of their time. They felt that they still had an element of the early tribalism of having, you need to have a tribe, you need to have a clan. So that is Al-Ju'fi, and obviously Al-Bukhari is from Bukhara, the area in which he's from. His kunya, you guys know what kunya is? A kunya is basically a name, like a title that you get, that is given, the Arabs have. So if, what's your name?
Yeah.
Usman.
Yeah.
So your father would be called Abu Usman. So do you understand? So
yeah.
Father of Usman. And if what you have any names already for what you want to name your kids? You got some plans? Choose a random name. Yusuf.
Yeah.
So you'd be Abu Yusuf. What's your father's name? Nasir.
Yeah.
So you're Ibn Nasir, son of Nasir. Do you understand? So that's in some ways a kunya, but also some of the Sahaba also had kunyas that were completely unrelated, like Abu Huraira, that means father of the little cat. Obviously he wasn't the father of a little cat, but it was what he was named. It was like a title that's given. So that's what a kunya is. The kunya of Imam Bukhari was Abu Abdullah. So just on a point here, there's a bit of confusion if Imam Bukhari was married or not. Some scholars say he wasn't married, and other scholars say that he was. We're going to go with the view that he was married. Now, did Imam Bukhari have a son? Again, controversy on the issue. But there are some narrations to say that he had a son called Ahmed. So, going on to talk about... Also, Imam Bukhari, he also had a brother called Ahmed. So, Imam Bukhari, he was born in 194 Hijrah, after Hijrah, and he died 256 after Hijrah. So his father died when he was very young. So it would have been before the age of 10 his father passed away. And also at a very young age, Imam Bukhari lost his sight. So when Imam Bukhari was before the age of 10 years old, Imam Bukhari became blind as a young child. Now his mother became, obviously as any mother would be, very upset about their child turning blind at such early ages. So every night she would consistently make dua and cry and cry and cry towards Allah, crying to Allah saying, please return my child's eyesight, please. One night she went to sleep, and Ibrahim alayhi salam came to her in a dream saying, Allah has heard your tears and has heard your du'as, and he has returned your son's eyesight. Immediately she woke up, ran to Imam Bukhari's room, woke him up, and as soon as he opened his eyes, he screamed, Mother, I see you. So we're going to come back to this point as well. So Imam Bukhari, a rough description of him, he was of medium height and he was very, very skinny. Now, just to introduce his mother and father slightly, his father, who remembers Imam Bukhari's name? Okay, I told you guys about like Ibns and Abus, yeah? Yeah, that's the end. So if Imam Bukhari's name is Muhammad ibn Ismail, what's his father's name? Ismail. So yeah, Imam Bukhari's father's name is Ismail ibn Ibrahim al-Mughira ibn Bardizbah al-Bukhari. So his father, his kunya was Abu Hassan. And his father loved to travel in the search of hadith. His father studied under Imam Malik. Who knows Imam Malik? Yes, so his father studied under Imam Malik and learned hadith from him. He also studied under a scholar called Hamad ibn Zayd. By the way, we're going to hear a lot of names that aren't common, but you have to understand, the people that made great people. So these are the people that made people like Imam Bukhari. So although they're not remembered, they're remembered because of Imam Bukhari. And think about it, if these people produced Imam Bukhari, how great were they? So his father also studied under Hamad ibn Zayd, who was a scholar of Basra. Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi said, the great Imams of the Muslim Ummah of our time are Sufwan al-Thawri in Kufa, Imam Malik of Hijaz, Awza'i in Shan, and Hamad in Basra. On a quick note about Hamad, he was born blind and he died blind. Yet he became one of the top 4 scholars of the time, of Imam Bukhari's father's time. He became one of the top 4, even though he was blind. So imagine the dedication he had to put into his life to achieve that. So Imam Bukhari's father was a scholar of hadith. Not a major scholar, not a famous scholar, but in and of his own right, he had a love and a passion for hadith, and he became very successful in the field of hadith. He also met Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, who we mentioned in 2 weeks ago, if you guys remember. In terms of manners, I mentioned a lot of quotes from Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, and he is like the master of this field. To describe him, you'd have to say he's a nation in and of himself. He was a scholar of fiqh, hadith, he fought in the battlefield for the Muslims, and he taught various other Muslims as well. Any field you can imagine, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak done it and was involved in it. Some of the people in his time, they said to him, why don't you sit with us in the masjid? Why don't you hang out with us and sit with us? He goes, because I go home and I'm in the company of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions. Now obviously they weren't alive when he was alive. What he meant was, I don't have time to hang out with you when you guys backbite all day, when I can go home and read books about their lives and gain knowledge. So he gave preference to knowledge over hanging around with bad people. So that's a bit about Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak. Imam Bukhari's dad. Now Imam Bukhari records this in his book At-Tariq al-Kabir. He records, because this is how important Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak is, that he said Ismail ibn Ibrahim shook Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak's hand with both hands. Now he's reporting his own dad just shaking the hands of someone, but that means something, because this person, to shake this person's hand, this person wouldn't give you the time of day unless you are an upright Muslim yourself and a person of stature. That's what it meant. So that it was an important thing to record. So Imam Bukhari's father, he also taught hadith, and he had a student called Ahmed ibn Hafs, and he makes a narration about Imam Bukhari's father. He says that I was with Ismail ibn Ibrahim, and he said, I've never had money which was haram or doubtful. Now everyone knows what haram money is. You're doing a job that's haram, but what's doubtful money? So an example is saying you're paid to work 1 hour, yeah? So you're paid to work 6 hours, but in one of those 1 hours, let's say you get paid £7 an hour, so you get paid £7 per hour. In one of those hours, you decide that I'm just going to sit down or play a game on the computer. Now, even you're getting paid to work and you're not working in that thing. That's not haram, but that's doubtful. Now, in most people, they take a little, they're not working all of the hours that they're being paid to work. Or sometimes they waste time and do other things. Imam Bukhari's father is saying that he didn't earn a penny of doubtful money. Not 1 penny. And as for Imam Bukhari's mother, there's not much known about her other than she's a great worshipper. Now just on a quick point here, so there's Imam Bukhari's father, a scholar of hadith, a pious man that's of the pious men of the time regarded him as a pious man. Someone who studied under Hamad ibn Zayd, one of the 4 best scholars of his time, and Imam Malik, one of the other best scholars of his time. There's him. And on the side note, there's Imam Bukhari's mother, who Allah directly answered her dua, which goes to show her piety. And there's the only narrations about her just go on to show how good of a worshipper is, how much she prayed to Allah, how much she made dua to Allah, and how many deeds she done towards Him. So if you have an amazing man, and you have an amazing woman, and they get married and they have a baby, what's amazing plus amazing? Truly amazing. So that's what Imam Bukhari is. Just to mention here, the dua that a husband and wife make when they want a child is that Allah gives them pious offspring. So if Imam Bukhari's father is pious and his mother is pious, and we already know that her du'as get accepted, it goes to show it that Imam Bukhari is the result of that dua and the result of 2 pious people. Now, just on a quick side note here, just for you guys are a bit young, but maybe you guys over here. Children, like the culturing of children is important. If you're not pious, don't expect your children to be pious. If you're not, like a lot of people, you see a lot, that they take their children to madrasa and they want their children to become a hafid. But what do? You go home and watch TV all day. You're not doing, and there's no religion in your life. Okay, maybe you pray 5 times a day. If you're lucky, you go to the masjid. But what do they see? You know, one of the logical explanations of why Imam Bukhari became an expert in hadith is because his father loved hadith. Children learn by observation. You know, when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted the Sahaba to shave their heads for Umrah, he said to them, you know, shave your heads. None of them done it. He asked the second time, shave your heads. None of them done it. He asked the third time, shave your heads. None of them done it. So he went to Aisha radiallahu anha, his wife, and he said, you know, I keep telling them to shave their heads and they're not doing it. And she said to him, she gave him the advice of, maybe if you do it, they will follow you. So he shaved his head and said, shave your heads, and everyone shaved their heads. The common thing is that we teach by example and we lead by example. So if you want your children to become gold stars in what they do, you need to be an example. And as for you guys, you need to choose good role models, because that's where you're going to learn your things from. Look, the main point really in mentioning Imam Bukhari here isn't to say this is the guy that authored the book that we're going to be going over and he's a great guy. The real point is, look, this is a book of manners. And this man that we're talking about includes all of these manners. So, who's a good footballer? Or what do you guys like? Football, is that your thing? Mm-hmm. Like who do you look up to?
Football.
Yeah, football. What's your favourite thing?
My favourite football player.
Yeah, football player. What's like?
Messi.
Yeah. Sorry.
Lionel Messi.
Okay. What's his name? Messi. Yeah, Messi. Yeah. Forget him. Imam Bukhari. Like, choose these people as the role models, because ultimately, your success in life will be through them, both with Allah in the ultimate game and in this life. Because look, Imam Bukhari knew from a very young age he had a skill, and that skill was his memory. So Imam Bukhari knew, okay, I've got a good memory. What can I do with that memory? I love hadith as well. Maybe I should become a scholar in hadith. He recognized his talent, and he went out and achieved and became the best in that. And look what he done. He wrote a book that from the day that it was written till now, Muslims are using till today. I'm not saying to you become a scholar, but learn what you're good at and become good at it so you can benefit yourself and everyone else. So take from that example, even if it's not a religion, like overtly or in your face religious, but something, you know, being, for example, a mechanic, it helps the ummah, because Muslims have cars that need to be dealt with as well. So, okay, back to Imam Bukhari. So, like I was saying here, Imam Bukhari was born in the latter part of the Abbasid Khilafah. He was, the town that he was from, Bukhara, was heavily influenced by the Romans. And yeah, Imam Bukhari became Imam Bukhari. So, Imam Bukhari memorized the Quran completely, from the beginning to the end, by the age of 10. He also said that he was inspired by Allah to memorize hadith. The narration goes back like this, that he had a dream that he had a fan in his hand, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in front of him, and all these flies were coming towards the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and with his fan he was fanning them away and hitting them and swatting them. Then later he went to his sheikh and said, "Ya sheikh, I had this dream, tell me what it means." So his sheikh said to him, "This dream means you will protect the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from lies, and those lies are the fabricated and the da'if or the weak narrations of a hadith that are attributed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam." So, and also Ibn Kathir says, just commenting on the memory aspect of Imam Bukhari, Ibn Kathir, the writer of one of the most famous tafsirs of the explanations of the Quran, he said that Imam Bukhari, when he read a page of a book, he would memorize it for the rest of his life. Now, Imam Bukhari, he also said that when he wrote his Sahih al-Bukhari, it's roughly about 2,000 to 3,000 hadith. And to choose those 2,000, 3,000 hadith, he selected from about 600,000 hadith. So 600,000 hadith is how many hadith Imam Bukhari roughly knew off by heart. Since you have your phone, yeah? Go to your calculator and do 600,000 times 5. So in Imam Bukhari's time, between him and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was roughly 5 people. So if you 5 million.
3 million,
Sorry?
3 million.
3 million. So he knew 600,000 hadith. And then for each hadith he knew, there was 3 million people on top of that he had to name in order with each hadith. And if you mix them up, that whole hadith is gone now. You can't quote that because that's a new hadith now. So, on top of that, Imam Bukhari studied under 1,080 scholars. Now, he had very strict conditions about which scholars he took from. Now, relating this guy to everyone here, we should apply the conditions Imam Bukhari had for his teachers, for our teachers, and especially when we go onto YouTube and other mediums for knowledge. So the first condition Imam Bukhari had was he wouldn't take from a person unless they were an upright Muslim. So we should know, okay, are the people we're studying from or learning from good Muslims? Second, he wouldn't take knowledge from a man who didn't say Iman is in the heart and in your actions. So we know that Iman is first in the heart, then on the tongue being the Shahada, and then in one's actions. So Imam Bukhari would not take from someone who didn't have the correct beliefs or the correct aqidah. So we should, before we listen to someone, we should do a bit of research about them. Say, is this person part of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah? Do they correctly adhere to the Quran and Sunnah in their beliefs? Now, of that one, and also he made sure that his teachers were reliable in their memory. So he didn't go from hadith scholars that were lacking in their memory. He made sure that each teacher he took from was the best of the best. Now, Ibn Hajar breaks his teachers into 5 groups. So the first group are those that met the Tabi'un. So who knows the Tabi'un?
Those who knew the Prophet or knew the companions of
Yeah, those that met the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah, so that was the first group. But more than that, it wasn't just that they met the Tabi'in, it was that they met the scholars in hadith of the Tabi'in. That's the first group. The second group are those people that met the Tabi'in but they didn't meet the scholars, the hadith scholars of the tabi'in. They just met a tabi'in and collected hadith from him, but he wasn't a scholar of hadith. The third group are those that met the tabi'in, which is
The people who knew the Tabi'in.
yeah. So the people that met the tabi'in. So there's the Sahaba, the tabi'in, and the tabi'in, which is companions, the people that met the companions, and the people that met the people that met the companions. So that's the third group of teachers that he had. The fourth, in this group are people like Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal, who you know Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal. He's the last of the four great imams. The fourth group are his peers. So if we're all going to a lesson, and maybe you learn a hadith that I don't know, we're equals, but I'm learning from you. And the fifth group and final group is his students. He would learn hadith from his students. So if his student had collected a hadith that he hadn't heard, he would collect it. And that in and of itself shows how genuine Imam Bukhari was, how sincere he was, that he would take hadith from people above him, below him, equal to him, those that were of less knowledge than him. He didn't care who it was from, as long as it was genuine. And that shows how sincere he was, that he would take, especially taking hadith from his own students. So by the time, remember, Imam Bukhari learned the whole Quran off by heart at the age of 10. Yeah. So at the age of 11, he studied under the local sheikh of Bukhara, which is his hometown. The local sheikh's name was Al-Dakhili. Now this is the first incident that truly shows Imam Bukhari's intelligence and skill in hadith. So the sheikh was narrating a hadith and he said, Sufyan narrated from Abu Zubair, from Ibrahim. Then Imam Bukhari, on a side note, in them days, lecturers didn't have notes. They would narrate thousands upon thousands of hadith from memory. So Imam Al-Dakhili said, from Sufyan narrated from Abu Zubair, from Ibrahim. Then Imam Bukhari puts his hand up and said, Sheikh, Sufyan never met Abu Zubair. So Imam Al-Dakhili, the sheikh of the town, an 11-year-old boy tells him he's narrated the hadith wrong. So his first thing that he said to him was, shut up. So Imam Bukhari persisted and said, look, Sheikh, please go back to your original book. So every scholar of hadith, even though they've memorized the hadith, they still write them down. So he said, go to your originals and check. So Imam Al-Dakhili went to his home, checked his books, and came back and said to Imam Bukhari, okay, what is it then? So Imam Bukhari said, Sufyan narrated from Az-Zubair, which is, so Abu Zubair, Az-Zubair, which is his son, from Ibrahim. So Imam Al-Dakhili then confirmed that is the hadith. At the age of 16, Imam Bukhari memorized Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak's book on hadith. He also then went with his mother and his brother to perform Hajj. So, how old are you guys roughly? 15. Okay, have you ever travelled out of the country? Okay, have you been Hajj? Umrah? Have you been to Saudi? Where have you been? Okay, so imagine you went to Morocco and you're in Morocco and then you said to your mum, Mom, I'm not going home with you, I'm going to go study under this sheikh here. So Imam Bukhari went to perform Hajj with his mum and his brother, and he said to his mum, he was 16, so he's 1 year older than me. So he said to his mum, Mum, I'm going to stay here and study under all of these ulama. You and my brother go home. But obviously Imam Bukhari was presenting his talent with Imam Al-Dakhili, correcting his sheikh in his hadith. And his mum agreed to allow him to study. So he travelled between the various places he studied, and he went to Makkah roughly 16 times. When he was 18, he then moved to Medina, like just by coincidence, he was 18 when he first went to Medina, but he also went to Medina 18 times. So when he was in Medina, remember I told you Imam Bukhari turned blind when he was a kid. And when his mother made dua, his eyesight returned. Not only did his eyesight return, his eyesight became better than it was before he turned blind. So much so that he wrote his first book in complete darkness with only the moon. So who's tried reading a book with like no lights on? It's really, really hard. Like half the time you're all over the place. So Imam Bukhari wrote a whole book called At-Tarikh al-Kabir, which is a book which is it translates to the big history. Till today, scholars of hadith use this book to find out narrators in the hadith. So if you have a chain of narrators, for example, and you want to find out, okay, what did this person do with his life? Who did he meet? What did he do? You would refer to Imam Bukhari's book. So he authored that book, and it's also in that book that when I told you, Imam Bukhari related the story that his father met Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak. So it's in that book. So little details about people. Imam Bukhari said about that book as well. He said that I could have narrated more about the people. I could have told you their whole lives, but I kept it short because I was scared the book would become too big. So he wrote that book whilst he was in Medina, near the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's grave, in the darkness of the night. He then travelled to Basra. Now the unique thing about him travelling to Basra was that when he arrived, the people described him as having no hair on his face. So he was still young, he didn't even have a beard. That's how young Imam Bukhari was. Now the story that happened in Basra with him collecting his hadith, he was studying under a man called Sulaiman ibn Harb. Now, on an average daily basis, how many people attended his dars, do you think? Like his lectures of hadith? So, like 50. So, on a daily basis, his lectures, 40,000 people came every day to study hadith. Every day, 40,000 people would come. That's how big of a sheikh he was, and that's how famous he was, and that's how much people wanted to learn his narrations. So Imam Bukhari studied under him, and he was the only person in all of 40,000 people that didn't write things down. So he just sat and listened. So if 40,000 people are writing down what they're hearing, and one person who doesn't even have a beard is just sitting there listening, what are people going to think? They're going to think, what's this little boy doing here? He's just messing around. So there was an occasion where for 2 weeks, 15 days, so just over 2 weeks, Sulaiman ibn Harb narrated 15,000 hadith. So on one of the 15 days, so that's like 1,000 hadith a day, on one of the 15 days, the other students came to Imam Bukhari and said, why don't you have your pen and paper? He just ignored them. Another day came, why are you not writing anything down? And then on the third day, he was like, look, fine, I'll narrate all 15,000 hadith that we've studied on the spot. So Imam Bukhari narrated from memory 15,000 hadith, which is roughly, on top of that 15,000 hadith, 60,000 people to name with those hadith in the correct order on the spot. Now, the students then realized how great Imam Bukhari was, and realized that when they were writing things down, they made mistakes. So they pulled out their notes and started correcting their mistakes. So, and then he said to them, do you think I come here to waste my time? So after saying 15,000 hadith, making them correct their notes because they made mistakes, then said, do you think I come to waste my time? I think he proved his point with that. Then after studying in Basra, he studied in Kufa, which Kufa was known for Imam Abu Hanifa, and there's a lot of value in terms of hadith and Islamic knowledge in Kufa. After Kufa, he then went to Baghdad 8 times. Now, Baghdad was the central of the Abbasid Khilafah that we're talking about. So, the Khilafah, on a quick note, Khilafah, in case you guys don't know, Khilafah means successor. Yeah, so the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was the leader of the Muslims, but Abu Bakr became his successor and was Khalifatul Rasulillah. And then, when it came to Umar bin Khattab, just for quick knowledge, they couldn't call him Khalifatul, so they named him Amirul Mu'mineen. So the Caliphate or the Khalifa is basically the next people or the successors of leadership of the Muslims. So the Abbasid Khilafate was the leading, this was the center, Baghdad was their center, and it was the head of all sciences, Islamic and non-Islamic. So when he came to Baghdad, because now Imam Bukhari is becoming famous, he's correcting sheikhs here, he's narrating 15,000 hadith, he heard just once, he heard these hadith, and he had memorized them and narrated 15,000. So now he's becoming famous. So people want to put him to the test. He's got a name for himself now. So in Baghdad, the scholars of Baghdad was like, okay, Imam Bukhari is coming, let's put him to the test. So what they done was, they got 10 students of hadith. And they said, to each 10, you narrate 10 hadith, you narrate 10 hadith, and so on and so forth. So there was a total of 100 hadith. Then what they said was, for each of your 10 hadith, to each student, change the chain of narration. So now you've now made a new hadith. So in hadith, even though the text, so say for example like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said such and such, yeah, and I narrate this to you. Now if my friend Atisham narrates the same thing to you, that's a new hadith because it has a different narrator. So even though the text is real, the chain of narration is fake. Everyone understand? Yeah? So there was 100 real hadith, but put with 100 fake narrations. So Imam Bukhari came and they said to him, okay, we want to do this. So the first student came in front of him, narrated the first hadith. Then Imam Bukhari said, I don't know this hadith. Okay, so the people, there was common people around that don't understand as well. Then the next hadith, he said, I don't know. The next hadith, I don't know. Until he had done 10 hadith. And he said, I don't know any of these hadith. So the people were looking around thinking, this is Imam Bukhari, the man that we heard about. Like the man that narrated 15,000 hadith on the spot. You know, maybe that was a bit exaggerated. Then the next student, the same thing again. I don't know these hadith. All the way till all 10 students had narrated the 10 hadith that were made up. And he said, I don't know any of these hadith. So after that had finished, it was now Imam Bukhari's turn to talk. So then he said to the first student, the first hadith you narrated, the actual narration, the narration you gave was this, and this was the hadith. But the real narration is this. And he done that for every single hadith. He named the fake narration, then the real narration. And he done that for all 100 hadith. Now all of the people knew that Imam Bukhari was big. Ibn Hajar, who knows who Ibn Hajar is or what he's famous for? Okay. Ibn Hajar wrote the most famous commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari. So Ibn Hajar writes, what's amazing about that story isn't that Imam Bukhari corrected all 100 hadith, because he's a scholar of hadith, that's expected. What's amazing is that he memorized in order all 100 fake hadith from one listening. And that is the point that shows Imam Bukhari's memory. So when Imam Bukhari was also in Baghdad, he also met Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal. And Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal said to him, look, stay in Baghdad, the people will appreciate you here and you will benefit the people. Just on a side note, Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal, he didn't study that many hadith from him because he had access to Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal's teachers. So even though he was younger than Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal, they were contemporaries, they were scholars at the same time. So even though he was younger, he didn't study too much with him. In fact, in Sahih al-Bukhari, there's only like 4 hadith from Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal because he didn't need to take hadith from him. He could take hadith from the people Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal studied with. So also Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal said, I have never seen anyone from Khurasan like Muhammad ibn Ismail. So he was saying that in the whole of Khurasan there is no one better than Imam Bukhari. Some of the scholars said, why did Imam Ahmed just say Khurasan? The reason why is because he was young. They said if he was older and they met, he would have said the whole Muslim Ummah. So after he was in Baghdad, he then went to Ash-Sham, which Ash-Sham isn't Syria, it's like Palestine, Syria, and the surrounding areas combined. But this particular place he travelled to was near Syria. So on his travel to Syria, all of his money finished, and he ran out of money. So he was travelling for 3 days, and for 3 days he had nothing to eat but leaves and grass from the floor. He ate them to get some nutrition. But on the last day, a man that he had never seen before came to him and said, "Here's this parcel, take it and feed yourself from it." So just on a side note, when you seek out Allah's pleasure and you do things for the sake of Allah and you sacrifice yourself, Allah will provide for you. Allah will make means. No one knows who the workers or soldiers of Allah are. Like with, for example, in Makkah, the animals turned. The elephant turned on the people that were attacking the Kaaba. No one expected the elephant to turn on them. So no one knows how Allah will provide things for you or how Allah will make easy things for you. All you need to do is trust in Allah and to do things for His sake. After Syria or Ash-Sham, Imam Bukhari went to Egypt, where he met Ibn Wahab, who was a student of Imam Malik. I mentioned this in last week's lecture. I don't think anyone will remember, but maybe if I say the quote, you'll remember. He said that I lived with Imam Malik for 20 years. 1 year I learned fiqh, and 19 I learned manners, and I wish all 20 were just learning manners. In Egypt, Imam Bukhari studied under a man called Muhammad ibn Bashar, and he noticed that Imam Bukhari, again, imagine these big gatherings, and he just suddenly notices Imam Bukhari and says to him, "You're a stranger, where are you from?" So he said, "I'm from Bukhara." And Muhammad ibn Bashar says, "Oh, how is Abu Abdullah," which was the kunya of Imam Bukhari. So how is him? So Imam Bukhari went quiet, and then the student said, "Ya Sheikh, this is Imam Bukhari." So he said, "Welcome, O you who have made me proud for the last 20 years. This is the teacher of Imam Bukhari." And he's saying, "Now I've met you, you've been making me proud." Imam Bukhari is still a young man. Also, Imam Bukhari, when he wrote his Sahih, he had various respected teachers that he trusted greatly. One of these was Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal and Ibn Rahway. And he gave both of them his Sahih al-Bukhari to review before he released it to the masses. Just some short stories on Imam Bukhari, in the sense that like who he was as a person and how he went about his life. So these days, like I said, Imam Bukhari is all of the things you need to be. So Imam Bukhari, he cared a lot about his society. Once a month, he would take time to sit with his students and learn their conditions, learn what they were about. And from that he learned, okay, some of my students have financial issues. So every month he gave 500 dirhams in charity towards his students. He'd leave parcels for his students to collect. Also, there was a project that Imam Bukhari wanted to do. He wanted to build a hostel, so like a hotel that was for free for people traveling through Bukhara and for students of knowledge that don't have anywhere to live and somewhere for everyone to eat. So he paid for this project to be done, and he organized it, paid for it, and took part in the building of it. And he was carrying the bricks of the hostel on his head. And his students said, "Ya Sheikh, there's enough workers here to do this, you don't need to help." And Imam Bukhari said, "This is that which will benefit me." Now, if writing the book that is only second to the Quran wasn't enough for him on Yawm al-Qiyamah, he wanted to do more things. He saw this will benefit me. Also, he knew that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the masjid of the Prophet was being built, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam also took part. So he wanted to fulfill that sunnah. No matter how minute it was, he wanted to include each and every last detail of the sunnah into his life. And also the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he also took part in building the trench in the Battle of the Trench. another narration about, in terms of the masjid and about how we go about the masjid as well. A man narrates, we were sitting in the circle, so the lesson of Imam Bukhari, and I was playing with my beard, and I had, a bit of dirt or a crumb of food in my beard, and I took it out and I threw it onto the floor of the masjid. So Imam Bukhari just looked at him, and then looked at the people and didn't say nothing. So Imam Bukhari waited until all the people looked away and they left the masjid. He then picked up the dirt, rolled it into his sleeve and threw it out the masjid. So 2 things from it. First of all, he didn't want to embarrass the man and show him up in front of all of his students. Second, he cared for the masjid so much that he would waste time on a little bit of dirt. Just, we see them on the floor all the time, and in our masjids we have no shame in throwing things on the floor, but something so small, it bugged him. It took his attention away from his lesson that he had to look at it. Also, Imam Bukhari, he was very careful never to hurt anyone. There was actually a man, the old Imam Bukhari, 25,000 dirham. That translates to about between 50,000 to 100,000 pounds. So if a man owed you 100,000 pounds, like, what would you do? Would you be calling him on a daily basis, asking, where's my money? Or having some sort of agreement? What would you do?
I would just say I don't want it.
You don't want it? That's very admirable. So Imam Bukhari, that's a lot of money, That's almost like half a house. Yes, so what do you like? Do you like PlayStation, Xbox?
Yeah.
Which one?
Xbox.
Xbox. You could buy a lot of Xboxes with £100,000. Like all the games that are out, you could get them. Are you sure you wouldn't chase that guy up? Okay. MashaAllah. So Imam Bukhari, his students cared for Imam Bukhari. So he really loved his students. His students really loved him because he loved them. So they said, Sheikh, let us go, go after this man and go after him. He's like, look, just leave him. So anyway, after again and again them asking Imam Bukhari's like, no. So they just went after the guy anyway. So they wrote a letter, they found him, they spied on him, found out where he was. And then they said, they wrote a letter to the governor saying, look, he owes Imam Bukhari 25,000 dirham. Sorry, dinar, not dirham. Dinar, which is the higher currency. So that's like penny and pound, yeah? So they chased after him, they found him, and eventually they were on the verge of beating him up. So Imam Bukhari is like, okay, I need to put a stop to this. So he came to him and said, look, you clearly need to do something about this. And he said, look, I haven't got any money, but I'll pay you 10 dinar per month. So Imam Bukhari said, okay. That man only gave, so there's 25,000 dinar, 10 dinar per month. That's 200 years that would be paid off. So that's not going to happen in Imam Bukhari's lifetime anyway. He knew he was not going to get that money back. But to top it all, that man gave him 1 dinar, and after that never gave him a penny. Just 1 dinar. So he didn't keep to his word anyway. Imam Bukhari also said that I have never backbitten since I have known it's haram. And also I have never backbitten since I've learned that it hurts those people that are backbitten. Do you guys know what backbiting is? Yeah. Okay. Do you guys do it? Don't tell me if you do. Just don't do it, okay? It's not nice. When backbiting in short is when you say something about your Muslim brother that he wouldn't like you to say. So if you talk about someone, and on a side note, the Sahaba said, what if it's true? He said, then you've backbitten him. And if you were lying, then you've slandered him. So now you've got the sin of lying and backbiting. So Imam Bukhari said that he had never backbitten. Now in the field of hadith, there is criticism and defense. Jar wa ta'dil. So you seek to criticize the narrator, see if he's faulted, see if he's weak, and you try to defend him as well. In this, Imam Bukhari never said such and such person is a liar. Like us guys, we have no shame in that, yeah? If your friend's a liar, would you tell me he's a liar? No? You're the good one anyway. So most of us have no shame in it. But Imam Bukhari would never say he's a liar. He would say he's controversial, or he would say the ulama kept quiet about him. And if he really had to specify, he wouldn't say it from his word. He'd say such and such scholar has said this about him. It's so much so that Imam Bukhari was so scared about this issue of backbiting that he, even though look how careful he was in it, that because he said this person was controversial, he said, I hope Allah never accounts me on backbiting. I hope that it is never in my deeds. So he was scared even to do something that is necessary for hadith. Also, Imam Bukhari did not care much for money. He didn't care for how the worldly desires, for example. So much so that when he was on a ship, he was sailing from one place to another to collect some hadith, and he met a man on the boat. And when you're on traveling for a long time, you become buddies. So anyway, he was talking to this man, and he said, I have 1,000 dinar on me. So the man's like, oh, okay, that's nice. So then they went to sleep. The next day, the man's waking up, slapping his face, ripping his clothes, saying, 1,000 dinar have been stolen from me. My money's been stolen. Everyone's asking, what's up? He's like, my money's been stolen. Then, so the captain of the ship, he's like, okay, we're going to search the whole ship and everyone on the ship. So now Imam Bukhari is like, okay, now I see what's happening. So then he took the money, his money, put it in his sleeve, walked to the edge of the boat and chucked it into the sea. Now, some people will be like, okay, so maybe some people could doubt Imam Bukhari here and say, okay, maybe this narration has been twisted and, he really did steal the money. But the thing is, Imam Bukhari is Imam Bukhari. Before he goes to study under a sheikh, the person is saying, you're the person I've been proud of for the last 20 years. If he was on that boat and wanted to keep that money, he could have easily said, no, I'm Imam Bukhari, I wouldn't have stolen. And the people would have believed him. But Imam Bukhari didn't even want to have a single shred of doubt on him. So what he did was, he threw the money into the sea. So after the money wasn't found, Imam Bukhari, the man came to Imam Bukhari and said, what happened to the money? So he said, I threw it into the sea. And then the man said to him, why was that so easy for you to throw the money? So Imam Bukhari turned to the man and said, Ya Jahil, O ignorant one. One second, let me find it. I want to read it from the thing. So yeah, he said, Ya Jahil, do you think I've spent all my life in service of hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that no one has one doubt on me as an imam, nor does anyone think that I lie or steal? Do you think I would risk all of that reputation, all of my life's work for some money? So that's how little, and 1,000 dinar is a lot of money. That is translating to about £10,000. Now most people would fight to say, no, he didn't steal that money, that was his hard-earned money. People would fight for that. But because of doubt, he threw it into the ocean and threw it away. So there's a lot more about Imam Bukhari and a lot of his trials, but we'll end there, and hopefully, inshallah, I'll mix it into the other lectures and we can bring it up in the future. So, Jazakallah khairan for listening to our lecture.